Welcome back to a new episode of Podcast on the Brink, Monday, October 7th. And on this week's episode of Podcast on the Brink, we have a first-time guest, Joe Jackson, who I've been following since a little bit earlier this year on X, does a lot of really good breakdowns of Big Ten college basketball at large. He's with Feed the Post and also hosts a podcast, Boilers in the Stands. Joe, welcome to Podcast on the Brink. Good to be talking to you.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. I'm always excited to talk Big Ten hoops, Purdue hoops, and we're a little less than a month away from the start of the actual season, so I'm very, very excited.
Before we dive into this episode with Joe, I wanted to remind everybody this episode of Podcast on the Brink is brought to you by Visit Bloomington, who is now a proud partner of Podcast on the Brink and Indiana University Athletics. From the excitement of college sports to local hotspots, Bloomington offers something for every Hoosier fan. Cheer on your cream and crimson while enjoying delicious food and drinks at mainstays like Crazy Horse. Explore the iconic Hoosier basketball trail and discover the rich history of Indiana basketball. Go to visitbloomington.com for all the details and get started on planning your basketball getaway today. Again, that's visitbloomington.com. Joe, I'm excited to talk to you this week because Purdue, obviously, in the preseason official, unofficial, I think that's what we're calling it, Big Ten media poll, I voted in that. I actually picked Purdue to win the Big Ten this year, which I don't think Indiana fans were all that thrilled with me, but I based that kind of on the body of work that Matt Painter's had now over a long period of time, the pieces that they do have back. I know everyone likes to point at Zach Edey now being a member of the Memphis Grizzlies, the two-time National Player of the Year, but there is a lot to be excited about, at least from a roster standpoint. Purdue returns. I guess, where are you as, someone who obviously went to Purdue and followed the team very closely? Where are you kind of as Purdue prepares for the season on this team and just the outlook for the year in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think the expectation is still to be very good. It is still to be competing for the Big Ten championship, and then to make a deep run in the tournament, right? And that's going to be the way Painter has built this program. That's going to be the expectation pretty much year in, year out for at least the foreseeable future. And obviously losing Zach Edey is huge, and I'm sure we'll touch on it more later, but there are still a lot of talented players on this team. Obviously Braden Smith is the headline of that, and he's been in a hot, not him, but debate about him has been very hot topic of, is he Zach Edey made and all of that. I think realistically, because when you look back at this team, they haven't lost a non-conference game, or at least a regular season non-conference game, in 2 years. That's just not going to happen. They have, they're going to have another top 10, probably non-conference strength of schedule. I expect this team to take some lumps in non-conference play, just as they probably try to figure things out, as Braden Smith adjusts to life as everybody adjusts to life without Zach Edey. 5 new freshmen, as they kind of, presumably 2 to 3 are probably going to get somewhat decent roles. So as they get adjusted, but then I expect by Big Ten play, by January, February, this team to be firing. And with the Big Ten being so wide open this year, I do expect them to be competing for the top of the Big Ten. Whether they win it or not, we'll see. But I do think that they should end up in that area.
Yeah, when I picked Purdue first, it wasn't so much a bet that I feel 100% certain that they're going to win the Big Ten. It was just when I examined the options of what we've seen in the past. And I know the past is not indicative always of the future, but at least we know that Purdue has pieces that are battle tested, won a Big Ten title, just went to the national championship game. And Matt Painter has arguably been, the best coach now in the Big Ten for, I don't know, going back to, he had those really rough seasons back kind of in the Tom Crean era where there was back-to-back years where Purdue wasn't very good. And then all of a sudden they flipped it and they've been the best program now for quite some time in the Big Ten. When you look at kind of just the Big Ten hierarchy entering the season, who do you feel like maybe are the teams that have the biggest chance to, I don't want to say play spoiler, but contend for the league title up there with Purdue?
Yeah, the first two that I think stand out is UCLA and Indiana. I think for me, UCLA is the deepest team in the conference. They have legitimately 11 to 12 guys that I think I'm not saying they're all going to play at this level where they will be starting at the starter level, but like I think they have 11 to 12 guys that it wouldn't shock me if day one Cronin's like, yeah, this guy's starting. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I understand that. But then I use the most talented roster to me, right? Like, and Miles Reyes, Sumar Ballo. I know you guys obviously are familiar with the roster. Like, I think top to bottom, just individualized talents, there is the most in Indiana compared to anybody in the Big Ten. The concern is how does that actually fit together, and what does Woodson do with it? But you have that much talent, you're going to be competing. Illinois and Rutgers are kind of the two. I think they're probably in the tier for me, but they're like a little step below for competing. They have the upside with, these really great freshmen, but it's also similar to IU. It's just how does this actually all fit together? And what is for Rutgers, right? You have obviously Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, surrounded them with shooters. What is the center room going to be, right? Ogbole is kind of and Somerville are only their two true centers. Neither of them have really had college experience. Do they play like Ace Bailey at the 5 at times and just go full on? We're going to trap everything and run and gun. Like, there's a lot of questions there. It's good questions to have. Every team's going to have a lot of questions this year in the Big Ten. And then same thing for Illinois, right? Lots of incoming freshmen. Yakuchonis might be, one of the best players in the Big Ten. He's a freshman. He's a young freshman at that. And you can kind of go up and down the list. So those are kind of the 4 to 5 teams. I know MSU's kind of gotten some talk to be thrown in there. I don't know if they're a team I'm going to need to see it a little bit before I fully put them up there, but the Big Ten's so wide open. It really is that, like, I expect the winner to come from that group of 5, but it wouldn't be the most shocking thing if, another team steps up and wins.
Drilling down a little bit more into Purdue, Braden Smith, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, I think there was some debate in terms of him being named preseason Big Ten Player of the Year. There was no debate for me when Dylan Burkhart of Hoops and I kind of did our off-season list of the top, I think it had been top 25, now it's top 40 Big Ten players. We've been doing it for a decade. Expanded the list this year, obviously based on adding the 4 new teams, but both of us, it was unanimous, picking Braden Smith. And again, this is kind of goes back to the same thing I said with Purdue. It's not that I'm 100% that Braden Smith's going to be the Big Ten Player of the Year. He's going to have to go out and earn it and play really well and probably expand upon what he did last year, which is a tall order based on, if you look at the numbers that he had last year, was just one of the best point guards in the entire country. But it kind of came down for me looking at the other names. It's like, who do you put above him based on, what they've proven in the league and the outlook for their role on the team this year? Did you agree with Braden kind of being named the preseason Big Ten Player of the Year? And what are your thoughts on just him actually going out and winning the award? It's obviously not the slam dunk that it's been the last couple of years with Zach Edey.
Yeah, and I think that's the key point. Like, I would pick Braden Smith as my preseason Big Ten Player of the Year because it's kind of like, who are you definitively putting over him? There are a lot of guys that I think you can make a legitimate case for, but at the same time, it's just like Braden Smith has done it. He's the only returner from first team All Big Ten last season. I think, at least on Twitter, and obviously Twitter isn't always the best places for debate, but like I think the misconception is like you said, last year and the year, or last year especially, right? If you were to put Zach Edey versus every other player in the Big Ten, and you were to like say who's more likely to win Big Ten Player of the Year, you still would have said Zach Edey, right? This year, if you do Braden Smith compared to every other player in the Big Ten, like, you're picking every other player in the Big Ten. But when you have to go to that kind of individualized, like, maybe Braden Smith has, he might only have like a 10% chance to win, but that 10% is greater than every other. More just kind of ballparking numbers. I don't know the actual number, but
right.
Like, no other player maybe has that. I've done through the stats, right? There was, since like 2008, there was 10 players total that averaged what he averaged last season. And, including the likes of like Ja Morant, Lonzo Ball, Jason Preston at Ohio twice. Like, the list isn't big. But what does he do without Zach Edey? And there wasn't a big sample size without Zach Edey last year, only 163 minutes. His numbers were still really good. The assists dropped, the points jumped. Small sample size, so it's not like definitive, but the thing with Braden Smith, and this is like when I watched his high school film coming into his freshman year, I watched a game and I was just like, yeah, he's going to start for Purdue at points. And it helps that at that point there was, questions of what was actually going to happen there. It wasn't like he was overtaking some, superstar, but I watched the film and was just like, yeah, like this dude, more than anything, he is a gamer. He is a competitor. He is fiery, and I think he's going to be able to even show that more. And is there going to be some bumps and bruises along the way? Sure. I mean, he had that, but I think the other thing is like, he's had that so far. Freshman year, like thinking about to his freshman year, very good freshman year. But the FDU loss, he was not good in that game. And some of the other games where during the season where he just got really sped up, teams were able to hard hedge and force turnovers and stuff. He got really good at that last year. And so I think people are also probably discounting that, like, yes, it is going to be a tall task adjusting to life without Zach Edey, but like, he's also shown like he will adjust and he will improve. And I think eventually he'll get to that point where it's like, yeah, he is going to be first team all Big Ten, whether it's specifically player of the year, who knows? There's like 10 guys that it probably could be. But I still have confidence that he's going to be good.
Yeah, I made the mistake last offseason going into the year of not including him on my top 25 Big Ten players. Purdue fans let me know about it all season as he kind of outperformed at least my expectation for him. But kind of going back to what you said there a second ago, the two Indiana games as a freshman, he was bad in both of those, and Indiana won both of those games, and he was thoroughly outplayed by Jalen Hood-Schifino. So it's not like this narrative that some people want to say, well, he was completely dependent on Zach Edey. Well, Zach Edey was there that season, and Braden Smith was not nearly the level of player that he was as a sophomore. So there's no reason to believe that he can't get better as a junior. I'm curious, as someone that kind of watches Purdue closely, what is maybe the next step for him as a player? What does he need to get better at in order to kind of reach his ceiling as a college point guard?
Yeah, I think the first thing, and Painter's harped on this. I mean, Painter's harped on this since his day one of freshman year, but it's going to be even more relevant now, is just aggression, creating his own shots. Last year, I think he averaged 12 points a game. 12 points a game, and he took, about 10 shots a game. That's going to have to go up. Whether it's 12, 13, he is a pass first guy. And so naturally that's what he's going to want to do. But, you take Zach Edey away and he averaged however many shots and free throws a game. That's a lot to have to fill. He is going to have to be a big part of that. I think in terms of other stuff, like, I think he's gotten very good with his decision-making. There's still going to be times he gets sped up, and just kind of overpowered at times, just being he's 6 foot 180-ish or something like that. But like, I think for the most part, that's good. The aggression is going to be the big thing. I think defensively, he's probably going to be tasked with a little bit more. We'll see exactly what Purdue runs as their starting five. There's talk this offseason, and I believed it for a while, that like TKR is going to be the 5 and they're going to play Colvin and Heidi at the 3 and 4. I don't know if that's actually going to happen now, but there's probably going to be a mix of that. Regardless, there's no Lance Jones defender in that starting lineup. And so Braden's going to have to be, I think he was quietly good defensively. Like, I think he was probably a little bit underrated, but he'll have to take that step of like, he just can't get bullied at times, and be able to do that. Those are probably the two big things. Handling the minutes is going to be the other. That's not really, I guess, his improvements, but it'll be interesting. I mean, he couldn't come off the floor at times last year. I don't know if he's going to be able to come off the floor this year, but I know Purdue would like to get his minutes down to like 30 to 32 a game. I think that's not going to happen, because how are you going to take him off the floor? But yeah, and then other than that, it's really just continuing to be Braden Smith, right? Like, he's obviously, he's projected to be the best player in the Big Ten. So there's not like gigantic leaps he can take, but it's the fine tuning things. It's understanding like his angles coming off screens are going to be a little bit different this year without Edey setting screens. TKR is going to be more of a short roller instead of rolling all the way to the rim. So Braden Smith working on those pocket passes where he comes off the screen and hits TKR at the 12-foot mark instead of at the rim. Being able to hold defenses maybe just a half second longer, because defenses aren't going to collapse on Edey now. It's going to be, they might live with TKR a bit more on the roll. So now he has to hold defense a little bit to create another shot. Just the little things like that are going to be kind of what adds up to him, taking that leap from really, really good player to like maybe All-American type level.
When you look at just what Purdue lost in terms of a production standpoint in Zach Edey, you mentioned Braden Smith potentially having to make up for some of that lost scoring, but it's not going to be just him. He's not going to likely average 20, 23 points a game. And even if he did, that's not making up for what Edey's production. There's a lot of good returning pieces on this team. Who has to make the biggest jump in terms of just production, not just from scoring, but rebounding and the minutes that Zach Edey played? Those are going to have to go somewhere. I'm curious how you envision that playing out.
Yeah, I think option A for that will be TKR, Trey Kaufman-Renn. Painter all offseason has been like, TKR didn't get touches and minutes last year because Zach Edey existed. It wasn't that TKR was like not good enough. And Painter's been very, very high on him and is very confident he should be like an all Big Ten player by the end of the season. And he is going to be the featured low post player. Whether they play him at the 4 or the 5 is going to be the big question. And that's going to be also answering kind of how they absorb Edey's minutes from last year. Cause that's the other thing. Edey played an insane amount of minutes last year. Like, what was it? I think he was up in like the 34 range. Like the dude didn't come off the floor for being 7'4". But when TKR is at the 4, which I think in Painter's ideal world, TKR is more of a 4. In my ideal world, it's Colvin and Heidi at the 3 and the 4, and they don't care about defense and they're just running and gunning and being more athletic than everybody actually. But we'll see if that happens. When TKR is at the 4, it's going to be a big question, and there's going to be multiple guys that get a shot. Caleb First, he's kind of gives the athletic rim protector. Daniel Jacobson, 7'4", freshman, has really good rim protection instincts. I think the body might need a bit of time, and there's going to be games where he just gets overmatched. Will Berg is 7'2", and he's a big question mark because he was like really, really good in his minutes last year. It's just his minutes always came in garbage time. And so he was really productive in those minutes, and you can't like hold that against him. But at the same time, he's right. He's not playing over Edey. So in terms of just pure usage, is going to be a lot more TKR. Wouldn't surprise me if he's the leading scorer on this team, if he averages 15 to 17 a game. I think it'll be a little bit more balanced, obviously, right, with maybe four guys in double figures. But in terms of that, that'll be that. There will be, at times, there will be Heidi at the 4 and TKR at the 5. I think they'll just have to go to it. And then the rest is just kind of a toss-up. I mean, even Riley Burgess, the incoming freshman, I think he redshirts, but like talk this offseason is he's just this super athletic, physical big that can move well. Like he might get minutes. It really is a toss-up. If I was to guess, I would guess it's probably Caleb First, but really it's anybody's guess at this point. We'll find out in a few weeks, I guess.
Caleb First was the more coveted guy out of high school, right between Kaufman-Renn and in First. I mean, what maybe has been disappointing, if anything, about his development? Is it just been the lack of opportunity? But because I remember seeing him in high school and thinking that he's a potential all Big Ten guy down the line, and it really hasn't worked out that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's especially last year was tough. Like freshman year, he comes in, he starts right away. He's playing fairly well, gets hurt for a bit, and then they go to Gillis the rest of the way. Sophomore year, he starts a good chunk of games, and there's that PK 85 tournament against Duke. He shut down Filipowski. Like he was the reason Purdue won that game against Duke because of his defense. And then last year, it's just my thoughts and kind of my hope is that it was just an awkward role where he's probably, the way his offensive game is developed, right? Not really being able to stretch the floor that well. And also he's really struggled finishing at the rim, finishing through physicality. Like he probably needs to play the 5 more, at least, in terms of offense. Defense, he can guard 4s or 5s. But then it goes back to like Edey, right? He's not coming in for Edey. I also think, I think backing up Edey was probably the toughest job maybe in college basketball last year, because we don't have to get into the fouls and the refs and all that, but you go from Edey's physicality and fouls, and I think First would come in and refs were just going to be fine. Like refs were just going to be fine letting him play, right? And he was going to take some beatings. it's just, yeah, I think the biggest surprise is his inability to kind of finish through contact, through physicality. And that's going to be the big thing. Like, if he can do that, he doesn't have, he can be a 6 points per game scorer. He doesn't have to be this huge points per game scorer, because what he brings is defense. And that's where I think, in theory, it works well with TKR. TKR is not the best defender. He's not a good rim protector. First has it in him. But he was just such a liability offensively that it just makes it tough to play him minutes on that end.
I'm not sure there's a big leap in Lawyer to be had. I mean, I think he's obviously a really solid player. We had him, I think, somewhere close to 25 to 30 in our list. A really good shooter. A guy I still think can get better, but I'm not sure that there's going to be a huge scoring leap. Two guys that I look at, though, and say, if Purdue's going to win the Big Ten, they have to have big seasons, are Colvin and Edey. What is the expectation, just from what Painter said and from you looking at the numbers and everything from last season and how they projected this season? What's the expectation for both of those guys, and what are their roles going to look like?
Yeah, and both of them should have big roles. If on the scenario that TKR starts at the 5, both of them will be starting at the 3 and the 4. If TKR is at the 4, I don't know. My guess would be Edey gets the first crack, just because I think Edey. I don't think Edey will get there this year, but I think by like his senior year, he'll be in talk for all Big Ten defense. I think he has that upside to him. You saw it some last year. He's a 6'7", pretty well built guy that can move really well. Obviously, crazy athletic. Everybody saw the putback dunk in the national championship game, and so the athleticism from both of them is going to be really the big thing. Just ability to, maybe help out on the glass a bit. Maybe be kind of this weak side rim protector if needed. Edey specifically, he's going to be able to be a bigger physical perimeter defender. At times, he's going to be able to guard 4s. And then for Edey specifically, it's just offensively, it's knockdown 3s and 1-2 dribbles into a layup or a dunk. It's going to be just being able to do that in more usage, right? That's kind of what his game was last year. Limited usage. He's going to get more. Colvin's kind of I would say more the wild card in terms of especially offensive output. He probably has the higher ceiling in theory, he could be this guy that can kind of just be he can go get you a shot. He has a really high jumper. He is also crazy athletic. And so he is, out of anybody on the team, he is most likely to be the guy that can just one dribble rise up over any defender. And Purdue might need that. And so I think the development with him is going to be big on the defensive end. That's kind of the thing that held him out at times last year, is just being a step slow on the defensive end. For as athletic that he is, I don't think he moves the best laterally. And so just working on things like that will get him more minutes, and then more minutes will mean more offense. And the offense is there. I mean, he shot the ball really, really well from 3. We know he's crazy athletic, can finish in transition, can finish at the rim, can get to the 1 dribble pull up. I'm curious to see what the usage is, because Painter said they're going to run more specific stuff for Lawyer, and getting him more looks specifically, kind of like what they did for Ryan Klein, that 2018-19 year, where Klein's kind of, the Robin per se to Carson Edwards. Some of that might translate to Colvin too. I think if Colvin's handle can improve, then it definitely will. I think that's the biggest concern, is that after that first dribble, what exactly does it look like? But both of them, crazy athletic, crazy high upside. Like, I think Purdue is banking on both of them taking some sort of sophomore leap, whether it's, all Big Ten honorable mention type, or if they're more just like they're both giving 8 to 10 points and 25 to 30 minutes a game. That's going to be the stuff that they're looking for sure from them, and they're going to need it.
Fascinating thing about Purdue, when you look at the roster, they didn't go in the portal in the offseason and get anybody. You look at all the freshmen that they brought in. I almost thought it was a thing of the past where a program would bring in this many freshmen, but Purdue, Matt Painter obviously prioritizes getting these players in and developing them over a course of many years. Do you think it was a risk at all not going in the portal for another experienced guy, or was it just more Painter feeling comfortable with kind of guys like Colvin and Edey and Lawyer taking on maybe a little bit bigger roles than because you just don't see that. I mean, the top programs in college basketball are all going out and getting guys in the portal, and Matt Painter's just kind of doing his own thing with hey, I'll roll this out with the guys I got back. I like my guys, and I'm going to get these freshmen in, and maybe they don't pay huge dividends right away, but 2 or 3 years down the road, if I can develop, then I have players that kind of know my system, and I don't have to really catch up to speed in a short period of time from the portal.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely is a bit of a risk, specifically in the 1-year sample, right? Like, even look at last year. Lance Jones is a huge reason why Purdue makes the national championship. Obviously, Edey is dominant. Braden Smith takes the leap that everybody said he needed to. But Lance Jones was a guy, even look at that Tennessee Elite Eight game. Purdue, like, I think they were 1 for whatever from 3. Lance Jones was like 0 for 4. Game gets to 3 points. Lance Jones drills a 3 with a minute and a half left. Like, he just had that to him. And so you're definitely taking a risk not getting a guy like, right? They could have used either like a proven big, maybe another like proven wing. But at the same time, Painter, like you said, he trusts his guys, he trusts his system. And I think what separates Purdue doing it than a lot of teams is that Painter is comfortable, and he gets guys also that are comfortable using the red shirt. There's probably going to be 2 red shirts this year. And so you're losing that production, from guys that probably wouldn't play anyways. But now when you said 2 to 3 years down the road, 4 years down the road, they're a 5th-year senior. And that's a big thing. I mean, TKR is going to be a redshirt junior, Heidi redshirted, Will Berg redshirted. Like, these are older guys than what their class says. And Painter believes in that, and getting them a full year in the system. Like, I assume, my guess would be it's Jack Benner and Riley Burgess this year. I don't know for sure. We'll find out later in the season, but he just has the comfort in that, knowing that, he has one of the best developmental stats in the country, or at least he has the confidence in that. He knows what guys he wants, and he knows what guys are going to be able to buy in, and he's going to be fine with that. And he trusts that, once you get to year 3 or 4, you're going to be really, really productive, and you have a squad of those guys combined with Painter, and he's going to take his chances.
With the freshmen that are on this roster, who do you feel like makes the biggest impact from day one?
I'm going to go Jakari Harris. I think he fills some of that Lance Jones role. I wouldn't be shocked if Jakari plays 20 minutes a game. I don't think he'll start, but I wouldn't be shocked if at some point he starts also. I think he's that good. Another very athletic guy. This will be Purdue's most athletic team, at least since I've been around the team. It's, my freshman year was the 18-19 Elite Eight run. So definitely the most athletic team I've seen at Purdue, maybe even further than that. And Jakari is another guy that's crazy, not crazy athletic, but very athletic, really, really good defender. Him and CJ Cox, right? Both incoming guards. Cox very much underranked probably, or lower ranked than he should have been. But 2 guys, athletic, can knock down a shot, and can also just really defend. And when you can look at the Smith-Lawyer pairing, I think the first thing that probably stands out is, like, that's not the best defensive backcourt, we'll say. Jakari and CJ are both going to get minutes because of that. They can also help handle the ball. And Painter said he likes 2 ball handlers alongside Lawyer. So I would expect both of them to get minutes. My guess would be if one takes the spot, it's going to be Jakari. Daniel Jacobson is a wild card to me. If the body's ready and he's like physically able to match up for 15 minutes a game, he's going to get a crack, just because Purdue doesn't have a true rim protector now. And so much of their defense has been anchored around that for so many years. I'm not as confident in him being ready day 1, year 1, but you at least have to shout him out, just because he's 7'4", moves pretty well. Like, if he can play, he's going to play.
Wasn't he terrific too in the USA basketball event, kind of in the off season, where it seemed like there was a lot of highly ranked players on that team, and he was maybe the guy that was flying under the radar, and he more than held his own.
Yeah, no, he had a very, very good summer for, I think it was U18, I believe, for the USA stuff. I mean, he was a guy that I'm not a huge, and maybe this is because I'm a Purdue fan, I'm not a huge rankings guy. Even when, for my offseason, I watched all the newcomers to the Big Ten. I don't actually look at the rankings because I want to have like my own thoughts. But I do know he was a guy that I believe was, around the hundreds or whatever. And he's a guy that shot up the rankings. Like I said, I don't know where he ended up, but there was lots of scouts that were just like, oh yeah, this guy is better than what we've had him at. The shot blocking ability is real. The fouling is going to be a concern, at least year 1. It's not, super uncommon for an incoming freshman. But the upside is absolutely there. I know he didn't shoot well his senior year of high school. Like from three, he was 2 for 9. So I think it's been a bit overblown, but there's also thoughts that like he could be eventually this pick and pop type dude. We'll see if that happens, but yeah, he definitely had a very, very good summer. And that's a big reason why he has so much hype coming into this season.
So we're 30 minutes into the podcast. Indiana fans are probably wondering, are you going to talk any Hoosiers? And I've got to ask you, you made my ears prick up a little bit there. You spent the offseason watching the newcomers to not just Purdue, but the Big Ten.
Yep.
Just for your general thoughts on what Indiana brought in from the portal in terms of the guards, and obviously Umar Ballo being a major piece. How does that change things? Obviously the talent is much better, but does it change the way at all Indiana can play this season as compared to years past?
I hope so. I think so. Obviously Umar Ballo, I wasn't too fond of it right away, but I do understand, right? He's arguably, he'll have a case for being like the best big in the country or one of the best bigs in the country. If you can get that talent, you go and get it and you figure it out later, right? And Woodson has shown he loves playing two bigs. Renew, with his passing ability, can work with Ballo. Carlisle, I really like the pickup. And I think, right, the big topic is 3-point shooting. And I just wrote an article about why, like, hey, the 3-point shooting numbers might be lying just a bit from last year. Carlisle took a ton of tough pull-up threes, and so his 3-point percentage tanked because of that. Catch and shoot looks, he was good. Smaller sample size, so maybe some variance, but he was good. He's a dynamic guard. And then Miles Rice to me is by far the most important player on this team. If he gets going, if he can create for others, IU is going to be good. If he struggles, you're getting, I'm not going to say it's last year, 'cause this team's probably a little bit more talented than last year's team, but you're getting closer to that where it's just like, IU's not terrible, but they're not like thriving like they could. Obviously, I know injuries hurt and stuff last year, but yeah, Miles Rice is going to be crazy important because when you look at the offense, right, I think whether you think it's a knock or you're fine with it, IU does not have a ton of movement always on offense. It is a lot of, especially from three, a lot of standstill, catch and shoot threes. It's not a bad thing, except for you need somebody to create for those looks for others. Miles Rice is a guy that can do it, and he's going to be asked to do it a lot. I think at media day yesterday too, he said, he likes to play fast. He likes to get going. So you could maybe play a little bit faster too. Especially with Carlisle. Like, I don't know I know Trey Galloway is still coming back from injury. I don't obviously know what he'll do. I would, like, if it was up to me as of right now, obviously I'm nowhere near a Big Ten basketball coach, but like, I think Rice and Carlisle should be your two starting guards because they are so dynamic and can get downhill and can create for others. And also I like both of their defense too. So I really like what they did. Obviously, getting a shooter like Luke Goody is great. I don't know if Langdon Haddon plays much, but he's a guy that, maybe could be a little bit of a stretch five if you need. I just think with Ballo and Renew, it's going to be tough for him to find minutes. But yeah, I really like what they did. Even Bryson Tucker, I think he's a guy that hasn't been talked about enough. I don't know what his year one contributions look like, but like, he's a guy that can go just create a bucket at any points. And for an IU offense that was stagnant at times last year, maybe there's a spot for him to do that. But yeah, to circle back, Rice and Carlisle, especially, if they can get going, they really, really elevate this team. And despite the pure 3-point shooting numbers, which is, I think, what a lot of at least non-IU fans probably look at and go, oh, that's not a good fit. Once you dive in deeper just a little bit, it's like, no, these guys are good and they're going to be crazy important for this team.
You mentioned the offense and being stagnant. It's obviously been a complaint by IU fans for many years. But how much of that do you think last season in particular was just based on who they had with playing point guard? I mean, you had Gabe Cupps for, I think, starting over 20 games last year, playing over 20 minutes a game. That wasn't the expectation coming into the season. The expectation was that Xavier Johnson was going to be playing a majority of those minutes. And really, I think later in the season, you found Indiana playing a little bit better when Johnson was able to stay on the court. So do you think it's completely fair to put that all on Woodson just in terms of how the offense looked, or do you think maybe it looks different now based on the personnel? Because a couple of years ago when Hood Schifino had the ball in his hands, nobody was really complaining. And last year, it obviously looks a little bit different when you've got Gabe Cupps, who, to his credit, was not expected to play that type of role. but then comes in last year and out of necessity has to play that many minutes, and it just didn't work. And I mean, even from talking to Cups this preseason, he was disappointed in the way he played, and has aspirations to play much better. But who knows how many minutes he's even playing this year? I mean, and that kind of speaks to overall the talent upgrade on this team.
Yeah, I think for me, like if somebody was to complain more, it's more about the roster Woodson put together rather than what he ran. Because you're right, like I mentioned, it's stagnant, but who was a movement shooter last year? Mbako, sorta, maybe a little bit. Everybody else, in terms of 3-point shooting, a lot of standstill catch and shoot guys. Like I said, that's not a bad thing. Those are really good 3-point shots. But now you need somebody to create. Johnson goes down. Who was kind of there to do it? Trey Galloway, filled in, I think, fine at the role, and maybe even better than expected at times, of sort of being the point guard at times. But yeah, I think it was for me, if there was going to be a complaint, it's less of what they specifically ran and more of that they didn't try, or I'm not going to say try, that they didn't go and get another kind of dynamic guard that could fill in minutes, right? And maybe you bring in that guy and you expect him to play 15 minutes behind Johnson and Galloway, and now he gets thrown in, but he's more capable. Maybe he's a junior senior type. This year will be the bigger test, I think, where if the offense looks a lot of the same and there's still a lot of the stagnation with, maybe Rice struggles a bit being able to create, I think that's where the complaints about what's actually being ran are more real. But yeah, like last year, like IU was dealt a tough hand, but they sort of did it to themselves too.
Right. But the roster construction, that's what everybody talked about. It's they were banking on CJ Gunn and Caleb Banks making these sophomore leaps. And when that didn't happen for either guy, they were so dependent on Renew and Ware to be everything on offense. Johnson goes down and Baco struggles early in the season. And Trey Galloway was really miscast as a point guard. And that's not his role. I mean, ideally, I agree with what you said in terms of starting Rice and Carlisle this year, because if Trey Galloway can come off the bench and be your sixth man and play a variety of roles, I mean, that's a pretty solid piece to have coming off the bench. So I agree with basically everything you said there. Last thing before we get you out of here, I wanted to just ask you in terms of the Big Ten, is there a team or two that maybe we're underrating in the preseason that's going to be better than a lot of these early projections say? I look at Northwestern and think I know they lost Boo Buie, and that's a huge loss, but I know they added a guard from the transfer portal. I know they've got Ty Berry going to be healthy again this year. Brooks Barnheiser, to me, is one of the most underrated players, not just in the Big Ten, but maybe in the country. And I look at them and I think people think, well, they got no chance to make it back to the tournament. I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm curious for your thoughts just on maybe a team or two that's flying under the radar here in the preseason, or could be better than people expect.
Northwestern's was my number one pick for that, of like, I'm all in on Brooks Barnheiser. I'm not saying it's a 1-to-1. I think he kind of becomes Marcus Damask of this booty ball type point forward, a little bit of everything. I think Damask probably a little bit better facilitator. Barnheiser probably a little bit better rebounder and defender. So it's not a 1-to-1, but I think that type of impact's there, and they're going to need it. And now, the Jalen Leach is that guard they bring in. He's more of a combo guard. He's not a true point. So I think that could alleviate getting Ty Berry healthy, Nicholson healthy. Barnheiser also needs to be healthy. I know he's been in a boot this summer. So like, I'm working under the assumption he's going to be healthy. And obviously, if he's not, that throws a wrench into all of what I'm saying. But they're a team, and I think I'll throw out two others. Maryland is one. And they're maybe they don't quite qualify because I know some people have them higher. I think they're going to be good. I like Gillespie a lot. I think the Queen Reese pairing could work. Selton Miguel, I think they bring in more shooting with like Selton Miguel, Rodney Rice. So them, and then the other team's Iowa. I just keep going back to Iowa, and it's just like they bring back a ton of production. They bring back Payne Sanford, who will be one of the best players in the Big Ten, one of the best shooters in the Big Ten. Owen Freeman obviously was, Big Ten or co-Big Ten freshman of the year. Josh Dix looks poised for he sort of had a breakout year last year. He might have like a big breakout year. Then they get Harding and Thelwell, who are going to be, I think, both very solid point guards. You just go up and down this roster. They bring in Seydou Traore from Manhattan. he's like the perfect fit at the 4 of this super athletic defensive wing forward that can finish at the rim, can run, but also is going to help fill up some stuff defensively. And so every time I just look through that roster, I'm just like, yeah, there's a lot of good players there. Fran McCaffrey, for all of his March struggles, he generally finds a way to be really good during the regular season. Last year was looking through, he hasn't been under 500 in Big Ten play since 2018. He's just going to find a way to get them to be competitive. And I wouldn't be shocked if I'm not going to pick them to finish like 5th or 6th. I think they're probably more that 7 to 10 range. But I mean, the pieces are there for them to just be quietly a really, really good team.
We know they're going to score a ton of points and be fun to watch offensively. It always comes down to how good can they be defensively, which the answer is usually not very good. But if you can score 80 or 90 on a regular basis, then you can beat a lot of teams, especially in the Big Ten. The teams at the bottom of the league aren't necessarily all that built around offense. So,
yeah,
Joe, where can everybody follow your work and stay in touch with you on social media?
Yeah, so you can follow me on X at Joe Jackson CBB. A lot of film breakdown is kind of my shtick, we'll say. Also, I'm on YouTube, Feed the Post. That's a lot of, especially as we get into the season, like in-game breakdown. So looking at a game, how did this team beat this team, etc. Also on Substack at Feed the Post. So and then if you do want to ever catch some Purdue stuff or maybe come heckle us after a loss or whatever, we do live post-game shows at Boilers in the Stands on YouTube. So that's where you can find me. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I won't come heckle you, Joe. You do a great job, and this is there's no hate from this side to the Purdue side. IU fans don't like to hear it, but Matt Painter over the last 10 to 15 years has just built a really good program in West Lafayette, and I think the best thing Indiana can do is hold up its end of the bargain a little bit better and have more competitiveness in this rivalry. I mean, we kind of saw that the last, Woodson's first couple of years. It was back and forth, and those games were a lot of fun to watch. And I'm glad that even though there's an 18-team Big Ten now, and with this unbalanced schedule, I'm glad that we get to see Indiana and Purdue play twice per year. I think that's something that we all want to see every year, and it's been a lot of fun. So, Joe, thanks for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, everybody, as always, for listening to Podcast on the Brink. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a rating and a review over on iTunes, our Apple Podcast. Sorry for the misspeaking there. And then also leave us a 5-star rating over on Spotify. And we'll be back soon with another episode of Podcast on the Brink.